A few moments, we'll hear from Leslie Hickle, who has become the CEO of one of the UCR spinouts named Farmsense. And we're really looking forward to that. And then our own Francis Reyes will speak about competition and the competition matrix. And we want to move ahead a couple slides to the homework and then the team group, and get your cameras ready. So for homework, it's going to be more of the same. Continue doing customer discovery interviews. It says to do 3, but of course you're allowed to do more. And a few of the teams want to do more just to get their head count up. And then your slide deck will be adding a new slide called the competitive matrix for next week. And you see that highlighted in yellow. So you're going to keep all your slides and add one more. And beginning tonight and continuing next week as well, we'll let you speak for 4 minutes instead of 3. So you have an extra minute to go over because we've added a little bit more on the slide count. So in addition to doing your interviewing and updating your slide deck, meet with your mentor, and there is a video available called Competition. And you see the link there in Basecamp. So let's take a picture of this one. So you don't have to speak for the full 4 minutes, but I'd like people to be done in 4 minutes. That would be ideal so that we have enough time for a few different comments. And when the mentors are giving feedback, if possible, don't give long replies back. If you're a participant, make a note of it, say thank you, and give the shortest possible response. That way you get the most mentor feedback. I noticed, at least in some of the groups, that we ran out of time, didn't get to ask all of our questions or make all of our comments. So as the other slide was saying, we want to be having you tell a story as opposed to just running through the slides. And the story is, what is your value proposition? Why does your customer need, want, or prefer your solution? And so let's use these slides as evidence, externally validated, that your customer is who you've identified, and the value propositions are what you've hypothesized as well. And it's not a once and done. It's continually fine-tuned and refined based on the new interviews that you're conducting. And by lessons learned and insights, what we're looking for are what they told you. Those are the lessons. And the insights are, so what? And what does that mean for you as a startup, or you as an organization, or you as a license play, whatever your desired outcome is? What does it mean for that? So if it doesn't have any impact on what you're going to be doing in the future, I would not call that really an insight. That would be primarily a lesson learned. And then the other things are to follow the structure of the templates, which most of you are doing. Some of you have added slides here and there, and whenever I see that, I politely request that you take them out, only because we only have a few minutes per team. And by consistency in your presentation, what we mean is, in your business thesis on page 1, you identify a customer. That customer should be the same thing on your last slide, which is your business model canvas. So if one is a person at one type of company, it shouldn't be an organization or a different type of company with a different person in the last slide. So be internally consistent. So there's a bit of repetition, but we'll call that reinforcement. All right, so Leslie Hickle is a friend of UCR and a double alum. How's that for punishment? Leslie has gotten 2 degrees from UCR and has been advising both UC and UCR for a number of years. She's had several successful business startups and exits. And I met her one day when I first joined campus 7 years ago, and she and I were watching this cute little computer science idea that was being discussed on how to be able to use less pesticides on crops, in particular on orchards, by the use of of robotics or sensors that could determine what and when there were going to be pests. And so you only had to spray those areas. And she asked them some very impressive questions. And years later, turns out that she ended up joining the company as an advisor and then kept moving up the ranks. So now she's the big boss. She's the CEO. So without further ado, let me introduce Leslie Hickle.
Thanks, Jay. Good. Jay had asked me to share the Farmsense story with you and how I met my colleagues. And it all started when I went to UCR as an entrepreneur in residence. As Jay said, I was mentoring students and faculty. And my career's primarily been in startups. I've done several of them. I've also worked for big companies. And so at this proof of concept meeting in 2017, I met Eamon. And Eamon had this idea of making a sensor for insects that literally use the same type of technology that a bat uses to echolocate suitable food. And he had made a prototype that was the size of a toy dollhouse and run off a car battery. Well, at the same time at UCR, Shalindra was getting his PhD. And Shalindra was intrigued enough to work with Eamon, and he reduced that toy dollhouse to the size of a Kleenex box, which was amazing, run off of chips. So I was thinking about what impressed me about their presentation. And the first thing it was, I'm an Aggie, longtime Aggie, and the tool that we use to monitor pests is a sticky card. It is from the dark ages and nobody likes it. The data is old, it's useless for models. So I actually sat up in their presentation. I remember it clearly and thinking, oh my gosh, they have a solution for insects. And the irony of it is I worked on sampling as part of my PhD degree many years ago. What I also appreciated about Shalindra and Eamon after seeing lots and lots of pitches is that they were well dressed and they gave a well organized presentation. You could tell from their presentation that they had a high mutual respect for each other. This is a pair that could work together and work with other people. And they had these other factors that indicated they were serious about what they were doing and they had spent their homework on it. So I started working with him and helped him to develop a business plan and opportunity analysis. And we actually looked for a CEO for 3 years and couldn't find anyone. So I joined the company in that capacity, and we have been moving on since there. And just to clarify a little bit what the problem is. So right now, people are monitoring pests with these sticky cards, and it's extremely laborious. These interns drive around in trucks. They literally look at cards with dead insects on them. And so by the time you get the data, it's 7 to 10 days late. And this is what the Farmsense process is now. That's our new manufactured sensor that you see there on the left. It's truly autonomous. There's no sticky cards. You just change the lure, and that's the only time you ever need to visit it. Your data is immediately available 24/7. So it solves two problems. First of all, you have in-field real-time data, and it's labor saving. So when we go back and look at the team after we decided to proceed, Lynn is someone that I worked with before on startups, and she also was very cheap, let's put it that way. And she also handled our HR, which is the other piece that you need in a company. Cliff and I were contemporaries at UC Berkeley. He is an entomologist, and he's been a practicing PCA with a very good reputation, excellent reputation for trying new technologies in the field. And Tracy was someone I actually hired when I was leading R&D at Mycogen, and she was the type of person I knew should be going to grad school. So I almost kicked her out and said, you need to go to grad school. I introduced her to a good friend of mine, Dr. Joel Coates at Iowa State, and she got her PhD there. And I want to also mention that because we were at UCR, we were so fortunate to have all these great mentors, some of which are in this group right here. And you need that as a startup. You need people to talk to that have expertise, that are on your side, that are helping you or keeping you pointed in the right direction. And the other people that I list here are, some of them are people I've known a long time or have been recommended by UCR. We were also beneficiaries of the incubator. We were one of the first companies to have incubator space. And we couldn't have afforded it otherwise. We were on a tight budget. So at some point in time, and I can't remember exactly when, maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we moved out because we needed more space. So we're off of Chicago Avenue in a lab, and I'm showing a couple people there, and it's a typical electronics lab. It has, except that it has 6 3D printers, which we ran constantly because we were making housings for the electronics. And the other thing that was in our lab was every lab needs a coffee machine, because that's what startups are. You're working almost 24/7 as well. And this one is a little complicated. I can't say I know how to use it, but they tell me it makes really good coffee. So just to give you an idea of what we've been doing over the last year, we've been making those 3D printed, and then we had to assemble them. And as entomologists, we know that color was important to insects. So we were trying different colors. We had different designs. It was a lot of work to do this. And we also now in that space have an area that we can test insects and train our sensor to recognize their wing beat frequencies. So this is really important, but in agriculture, as in any place, you have to test it in the field. And we have spent 5 years in the field testing our sensors in various locations for insects, even though our beachhead was navel orangeworm, which is a problem on 1.6 million acres of California tree nuts. We also needed to show that the sensor was robust enough to recognize other insects. And the reason it takes so long to do this work is when you're growing crops, no year is the same. And it takes a minimum of 3 years to ground truth something and make sure it's field hardened. And I want you to look at that light brown apple moth sensor that we had out in San Diego County for almost 4 years. It's worked. These are the things you learn when you put devices out in agriculture. And but it still worked. The interesting thing is the hardware still worked, the sensors still work, and we ground truth everything. Even though our sensor is electronic, we ground truth everything with either sticky cards or cameras. So the startup challenges that we had, which many of you might run into, especially if you are in a market that's in transition, and ag is in transition, is our funding is raising money. So we were really fortunate in that we have had 6 NSF or SBIR grants for $4.5 million. We've had numerous awards and recognition, and we have small friends and family, SAFE, that has tided us over. We've also had, like, I don't take a salary, Cliff didn't take a salary. We have a mature, you would say, group of people who are passionate about what we're working on, and that's why we're doing it. So you would think that ag tech was, people kept saying ag tech is the next big data play. However, the value of monitoring clearly is underappreciated, unless you're an entomologist, it turns out, because we got comments like this. Why monitor if you're going to spray anyway? This is from an ag VC. And jobs will be lost. Well, the jobs that are going to be lost are the summer interns who have the thankless, mind-numbing job of driving around, looking at sticky cards and counting dead insects. I don't really think it's a job you would recommend as a career training. So, and all the people told us that they would rather be doing something else, and farm managers said there's always things to do on a farm, which is true. The other thing is that COVID set us back about 2 years. So you have to plan for these events in a startup. We should have been commercial 2 years ago, but literally we couldn't get out and do any testing, and manufacturing delays were significant. And we're still feeling it to this day. We used the time to continue to refine the sensor, and we had to redesign some components. But it worked in our favor in the long run, because I actually think that launching in this climate in ag tech, people are finally realizing monitoring is important. So let's look at the realities of ag investment from the situation where investors, mostly Silicon Valley, were looking at this as the next SaaS play. But in reality, the SaaS universe is magnitudes larger than the ag customer database. We only have 2 million farms in the United States. And these new IoT sensors are really targeting specialty crops, high value crops or irrigated acres. There's only 11 million acres of irrigated crops in the United States. If you, of specialty crops, if you add irrigated corn, you might get another 20, 30 million acres, but corn is not a quick adapter. The other thing that was not in our favor was previous to our IoT sensor for insects, there was about 5 years of experience by the industry of water sensors, because water is the #1 problem in California. Water and labor, they're neck and neck. And the problem with the IoT water sensors is they fail to deliver returns. And it's because if you know anything about ag and irrigated ag, there are so many different irrigation systems that these IoT sensors needed to interface with, and they weren't set up to do that. Also, it matters whether you have your own well, whether you have irrigation district, combination, et cetera. So there was a lot of logistics that didn't get or wasn't analyzed or understood until too late. So some of these IoT, these companies are all gone. And here's the reality. Monitoring is not sexy. Ag investors would rather put their money in something like a new pesticide. And this is a diagram, this group puts it out every year. They do a great job. There's about 1,400 companies here, about 800 developing biopesticides. But what this industry is finally realizing is they're not drop-in replacements for synthetics. And they are going to need monitoring. And we think there's a whole new area of companion diagnostics that's emerging. And it's similar to companion diagnostics in pharmaceuticals. If any of you are taking antibody drugs, you have a diagnostic that diagnoses it. FDA requires it, that diagnoses and monitors the efficacy of the treatment. So this is all happening right now. 2 years ago, it wasn't as much interest. And we also keep up to date and are looking at collaborations with robotics and drone companies. So the robotics companies have really potentially synergistic technologies to Farmsenses. And it's really fun to see how this robotics landscape is increasing. A lot of money going into crop robotics, and more than drones actually right now to solve problems in ag. And I think that are any of your groups doing AI research or based on AI? Yeah, okay, so
Yes.
they know, you guys know then, the power of AI is that you have a clearer idea of what's happening in the present, right? You're gathering data, and immediately when you start gathering data, it becomes historical and you can start to build predictive algorithms. But the real power of AI is to create solutions. And that's what we're working for in ag. But the problem with these IoT AI sensors is that we didn't have an infrastructure to support them. The second 3 Ps, people, process, and platform. And this is what everybody's running at right now in the ag ecosystem, because farmers don't want another app. They want their information in one place, and people didn't know how to provide it in an actionable, understandable form. So this is really big right now. So the other thing is that ag needs to move from, they're trying to move from the farming situation now to smart farms, but in reality, they need to, for insects, they need to consider smart farming communities. So I don't know if you all know, but Yuma produces 80% of the nation's lettuce. And that in itself is amazing. I'm not in Yuma, I'm actually at a conference in Phoenix, but this is a Yuma field behind me. And the whole valley looks like this during this time of year, and it smells like a salad bowl. What's really exciting in Yuma is it's going to have 180,000 acres of every acre of agricultural land in Yuma is going to be connected. No other growing area has this. It's going to have 17 cell towers throughout the growing area, and it's led by the University of Arizona. What's also amazing is this is the only area that I've seen where all the stakeholders are present. So it's a really good area to get feedback from farm equipment company, from banks that are funding the growers, all the ag service providers, all the way to processors. Literally an end-to-end of the Yuma agricultural area. We have 27 processors here. So I think what we're seeing is a huge change just within the last 2 years of how automation is going to actually be implemented in these agricultural areas to create sustainable farms. So here's our goal, and it's always been this way, but it's now more tractable. And as you know, we're not just doing insects, right? Because insects are in an ecosystem of plants and disease and other factors that affect the development, as well as a market. And the real economic threshold models that the grower wants to see at the end of the day wants to, or she wants to know if she's going to make money. And that's the type of model we're developing. So we're collaborating actually with quite a few companies. And we also do a lot of outreach. Our blogs are always meant to be educational. Eamon and Chalinder just taught this class for a STEM group. And there's a net exodus from agriculture. We're having challenges keeping people on the farm. And so we felt that this is a way to give back. We're looking at a collaboration with Future Farmers of America about helping people understand these new technologies that will make farming more sustainable, because we're in transition from actual farming to how we use information to improve farming. So it's a quick presentation, and but I just wanted to let you know that it all started at UCR. It all started because of a meeting between myself, Eamon, and Chalindra, who are there in this picture, and Tracy and Cliff there as well. So it was short, but it was a lot of work. It was a lot of help, and we pivoted a little along the way. That customer discovery y'all are doing is really important. Figuring out your right market is important. All the things in the class, and it's never ending. We've been doing it now for 7 years, and we're still doing it. So the one thing you have to do is be flexible and just be open to new ideas.
I think it was a well-timed and very interesting presentation. Leslie has time to answer a couple of questions while you raising your hand in the function. Let me ask her, how many rounds of different non-dilutive funding has FarmSense been able to attain?
We've had 6 SBIRs, actually 5 SBIRs and 1 NSF, very large grant. And in fact, we put into for 2 phase 2s. And if we're successful, one is for mosquitoes and one is for a closed loop system that we're developing. If we get those, they'll be funded next January. Total would be 6 million over 3 years, which is not bad. And we've had about another 1 million in awards. And then we have we have 1 million in friends and family. So yeah, it's pretty exciting to get this far, and no debt. But we run a lean
That is
organization,
an
and we've
amazing
had
success
so much
story.
help. Yeah. It's not
Congratulations.
because we've had so much help, which is why I think the incubator is such a great idea. As I mentioned, I've done a lot of startups, and I wish I had learned the things that the incubator is teaching like 25 years ago or 30 years ago. Would have saved a lot of time and angst.
Well, things have gotten better.
Yeah, and
Merrick.
if any of you are interested in ag, we'd be happy to talk to you. Uh, I think in a previous life I was a farmer or a cowboy, one of the two.
Merrick?
Hi, great talk. I'd actually be interested in chatting with you offline about some of the ag tech related things because I was in one of those ag robot startups for a little bit. Could you talk a little bit more about the process you use to figure out how to present the information to your end user and how you went about refining the data presentation?
So our end user is actually a person called a pest control advisor. And what's in our favor is that we're not creating a new market like many of you are. We're actually replacing an old technology with a new tool. So our end user already knows how to put up a sampling device, how to put up a sticky trap. But instead of putting up a sticky trap, they put up our flight sensor. When you explain the fact that wing beat frequency is an insect's fingerprint, they start to understand that. What's also been in our favor from the very start, we seek out KOLs, the key opinion leaders in this area. We gave them sensors to test back in 2019, 2018, 2019. And we worked with them. It was one of the early prototypes. They set up a very large test, USDA ARS, and they put out a publication 2022 that says it works. And we knew it worked already, but when you have a testimonial from a USDA researcher, and in fact, at this meeting, I'm here in Phoenix, they published another publication that says this is really good. So it takes a while when you have new technology to get those testimonials. So if you're in an area where you have a prototype, find those people and talk to them. Because what you also have to do, and we engaged on a PR campaign, I have to thank Scott for that. He said, you should talk to this PR group. We've had a small amount of money going to a PR group now for 6 years, 5 years. And they have helped us look more professional. And we decided to write blogs. We put out press releases. We're a tiny little company. But remember, you're seeding your potential customers with ideas for the future, right? So when they start searching you, you start showing up on the web and people start seeing you. We also gave a lot of presentations to get people used to the idea there were other ways of sensing insects than sticky cards or cameras. So since you're all innovators, your ideas are new, and you want to be able to seed your future audience. Remember, it's like, I used to use the term kissing frogs, might not be right. Planting seeds. Yeah, you have to plant a lot of seeds and see which ones come up. And
Okay,
I think we
Steve has a
spent some.
question.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. I've heard the presentation a few times, but it's always fascinating. So thanks for joining us tonight. Knowing what you do now and looking back, and you did touch on this a little bit during the discussion, but if you could do something differently, knowing what you do now, what would be the one or two things you'd do very differently, knowing where you are today, reflecting back on the start?
Yep. So the one thing I would do differently is I would not have put manufacturing in China. China has been a pain in the butt. And it's challenging to work with. It's not that cheap. And with the geopolitics the way it is now, I'm going to reshore manufacturing because the US now has grants that they want to bring manufacturing on shore. But what I would have done, any company that has hardware, software that looks like ours, I would have set up a pilot scale lab somewhere. And that way it's close to where we are. We could do the debugging locally, because even though we think we have the final design, when you go to a manufacturer that's never done it before, there's still problems. So that is one thing I definitely do over. No offshore. Until we get to maybe, 50,000 units or something like that. I don't know.
Thank you. There was a question in chat. Did you give away samples, product samples?
Yes. We produced 600 of those sensors 3D printed, and we got as many of them out as possible. We wanted feedback from the users. And in fact, our first 1,000 manufactured units, I'm using as a marketing incentive. We're giving them away under a research and collaboration agreement. They're free for the first year, but we want their feedback. So as an appendix, we've attached a whole list of questions. And it's also a way we had to, oh, by the way, we had to redo our app, our user interface. So here's a question for you computer guys. What do computers, scientists, and entomologists have in common?
They like
Bugs.
to
You don't know how to
bug.
build an
Data?
app?
Debugging.
Debug
Bugs.
is one, but here's
That's
the
a good, that's a
difference.
good one.
But that's a problem because all these investors are computer science in Silicon Valley. They think you can debug in 3 months in an air-conditioned office. But in reality, in ag, you need to get dirty. And you only get one bite of the apple every year, which is why it takes so long to get something in ag. And you're not going to see the $1 million 3-month revenue or the 100 million. I mean, the market is just not that big. But the one thing that we entomologists and computer science, we love a lot of data. We love data points. But guess what? The grower doesn't want data. They want information. They don't care exactly how many moths are there. They don't care. They just want you to tell them it's going up, it's going down, and that. So from the start, that would have been another thing, probably, Steve, knowing back, we would have designed our first user interface to reflect more of what the grower wanted to see instead of what entomologists and computer scientists want to see. And by the way, so you might find this funny, but when I first met Shalendra and Eamon, I had no idea what IoT meant. I mean, I grew up where there was no internet. So when they said, oh yeah, we have an IoT device, I thought, oh, it's an everything on the internet. And then you find out that these devices are everywhere. And so for me, I learned a whole new lexicon. And for Shalendra and Eamon, I will say Eamon likes to print a lot of times on his slides. He picks the prettiest insects, and he had a peach tree borer because it looked better than a peach twig borer. There we go. They're not the same insects. And he goes, no one will know. And I said, yeah, entomologists will know, but computer scientists won't know, right? So we had some really great conversations, and it's been fun.
I think we've got.
And that's the other thing too, when you have a team, you really need to work with people that you enjoy being around because you're around them a lot. So my 3 things to look for are, do you have a good sense of humor? Are you flexible, and are you trustworthy? And you do need a team. You can't do it by yourself. I think 3 is a magical number, but if you can build it out and maintain that kind of trust and loyalty and openness. We have very frank discussions. We're very different people, but we agree to disagree and move forward. And we don't like revisiting the same issues.
Francis?
Well, for the sake of time, why don't you answer the question from Merrick?
How did you, what was the word? How'd you,
Are there
deal
any
with the increased
specific-
cost of,
Sorry, what was that?
when you brought your manufacturing back to the United States, how did you deal with how did you absorb the higher costs?
I haven't done it yet. I'm still looking for a vendor, and I found 3 in Phoenix and 1 in Yuma, of all things, who manufactures the parts for Toyota America. They set up a brand new injection molding plant in Yuma. So I will be talking to them, and I'm exploring economic incentive grants with Arizona. Arizona has been really progressive as far as bringing in new business.
You ought
And,
to, you ought to look at, there's a huge new manufacturing push going on in Southern California. You know, again, maybe not the same grants that are available, but there's kind of where SpaceX used to be. There's a ton of hardware, actual manufacturing startups and on-demand manufacturing. And so I don't know if it'd be exact fit for what you need, but it is something a ton of startups are now starting to come to Southern California for, just so you know. But Arizona has great stuff going on too, and so does Texas, obviously. But yeah, so
Yeah, maybe you can send me a link, Scott,
Yeah.
yeah,
to,
I'll send you some ideas.
yeah, we're open. I just know I don't want to be there.
Yeah, yeah.
Leslie, Merrick asked a question. Are there any specific grants or programs to target beyond the SBIRs to support onshoring?
It depends on what field you're in. So NSF has had different kinds of grants. This last one that we got wasn't an SBIR. You didn't even need to be a company. It's called a Convergence Accelerator. And this is the one that our phase 2 would be 5 million. And what it is they're looking for innovations from teams. They want it to be team oriented. We're one of the few companies that got accepted. Most of the teams are from universities, and they're from multiple universities, and they're solving a problem somewhere. So I would take a look at the NSF Convergence Accelerator because they're funding a lot of stuff. DOD is funding a lot of things. I'm more insect oriented. So we're also looking at California Department of Pesticide Regulation grants. They've asked us to apply. Sometimes we just get sent solicitations because they know we're active in this area of remote sensing and integrating information from various sources to provide answers. I mean, it doesn't hurt us that Eamon is like top 10 in the world in AI. So people know Eamon, and he has been fabulous to work with, as has Shalindra. I think the hardest thing, honestly, for Shalindra and Eamon, because they're computer scientists and they see some of their friends who are in Silicon Valley have products like within a year and they're making millions of dollars, is I think it's eye-opening to them to see that ag is not the same type of business. But you have to feed people. So I think it's a noble business. And we have to figure out how to control these pests. It's not just insects, it's also disease and nematodes. So if any of you have colleagues who are in ag at UCR, we also host interns in our lab. They've been mostly coming from computer science, but we would like to encourage people to take a look at these really challenging problems. We're only a piece of the answer and only a subsection. We're lucky in that 80% of the world's pests are moths, right? So we can see moths right now. We gotta work on the rest of them. I don't know if I answered your question. You know who knows? You should talk to Eamon. Eamon sees probably more grants than I do. And he told me, I remember he found one in Saudi Arabia and he goes, should I apply? And I said, sure, it's a lot of money. And we won. We don't know what we won, but but that's how you work as a team, right? You go with people's strengths.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Leslie. Wonderful as always to see you, and I think you had a lot of wisdom to share with us. And thank you very much. Let's give her a UCR round of applause. Set our reaction buttons to thumbs up or love,
Thanks, you
whatever it
guys.
is.
All right,
And
good
glad you
luck.
found a lot to share your
Yep.
knowledge with us.
Thanks, Leslie.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Leslie.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Leslie. Good seeing you.
Good seeing you guys.
Francis, it's a tough act to follow, but you're up next. And
Yes.
let's talk a little bit about the competition and competitive matrix. And
Definitely. Okay, I'm gonna try to stick on time, so I'm putting my time here for my 10 minutes. Let's do this. So you know that today we're gonna cover competitive analysis or competition matrix. But the reason why I want us to take some time to reflect on this is because when we're doing this competitive analysis, we need to take some time to analyze who is our competition. And this sometimes it also helps us to reflect on what are our strengths and our weaknesses, and what are the things that make our product or service so unique, and what is our value proposition? What are the things that we're offering to these potential customers? And most of the time it is also because when we have to have this conversation, we have this idea that based on our competition, we can create a better strategy. So how we be and the place that we have in the market. And most of the time when we talk about this in businesses, like if that strategy has to go in either as you are in a blue ocean or a red ocean. What that means is like if you're in a blue ocean, it's because you don't have a lot of competitors. So you're okay. But if you're in a red ocean, basically that means that you are surrounded by many, many sharks. So your competition is very, very fierce. So based on that, you need to evaluate what type of ocean you're at. If you don't have a lot of competition, or you have a minimal or non-existent competition. So that is obviously a very important exercise that you have to do on a daily basis. Now, Scott and many of the entrepreneurs in resident and the mentors will tell you that when you are doing a presentation and they ask you if you have competition and you say you don't, the first thing they're gonna say is like, you haven't done your homework. It's like, because the more you investigate, you're going to find that there's somebody doing something similar to you. So it is a matter of showing not only that you know where you stand, but you have done your homework, right? And also that you have what it takes to move your technology forward because you understand where you stand, you create a strategy, and you have a plan for the future, right? How you're gonna tackle that competition. So when we're talking about your competitors, you can divide your competitors in three. Like the direct competitors is quite simple because those are the ones that are doing something similar to you. The indirect competitors is like what they're doing, like substitutes of an existing product or service. But the future competitors is like when you already know that tendencies is like you already know that the industry is changing and something in the market is changing. It's either because you're watching the news or because your customers are telling you, or even when you're doing these customer discovery interviews, you already know that, for example, AI is going to take a very important thing on everything that we do, right? So what is the future and how that is going to affect your technology? Now, I also think about this. Many of you right now are thinking about how you're going to convince these potential customers to pick you. So think about this, like for example, you, Magdalena, how are you gonna convince them to use your app? Or like, Neotech, how are you gonna convince them to go your route? Or how are you gonna convince all of them to give you a chance? Leslie was telling us that she actually went and tried to convince them with this opportunity and the value of her technology and how innovative was her approach. So here's where you have to convince them to give you a chance, right? It's either giving them a sample, give it a try. If you like it, if you think it's so good, that way you can buy this, right? It's like that testimonial is critical. But you need to convince people, at least one person, one at a time, right? That you have what it takes, or you're solving the problem. Remember, we're trying to alleviate pains. So it's how you're gonna make that decision, how you're gonna transmit that story with your presentations or with your products or with your minimal viable product, right? Now, where do you start? Well, customer discovery interviews help you a lot because you can go and ask them, what are the products or services that you're currently using, right? Who is my competitor? can be asked right now in all these customer discovery interviews. You can ask them, do you like this thing? When I talked about this, it's like, ask them the good, the bad, and the ugly of the existing products or services. And that will help you to identify who are these existing suppliers, identify who are these companies that are creating these products and services, and what are the pain points that they haven't resolved, or what are the needs that they haven't satisfied to this potential customer. So that way, when you go and you say like, ta-da, here's my product or service, it's because you already analyze the existing product or services from your competitors. Now, what is next? As you know, right now, you can go with ChatGPT and ask, who is my competitor? But also you can go and look for this in different places. Obviously, you can go to Crunchbase and identify the competitors. When you did your market research analysis, over there you identify some other data sources, and they probably, when you were doing your TAM, your SAM, and SUM, in that market research analysis, you also identify some of the competitors. But also remember here, what is the geography that you want to cover? So let's say, for example, that you want to do something similar to Uber. So you're going to find that Uber in the US have very specific competitors. But if you want to do this for Asia, you have other competitors, right? So identify also what is the space that you want to cover. So that way you're going to identify what is the best, right? And also consider cultures and things like that. Because remember, we are probably not the first one that thought about all these solutions to this existing problem. But also think about this as to you identifying reliable sources of data for this, okay? And you can actually look for different databases and see if they matches, right? If the competition is real or is fictional, right? Or who are your true competitors? Also consider like, what are you compete? Let's say that right now you are creating a material, a plastic. Well, if you're creating a plastic, you are actually looking for other plastic manufacturers as your competitors. You're not going with cars as your competitors, right? So try to match your product, your service, or your industry with something that is your real competition. And your mentors can help you analyzing that. Now, when we're creating our competition matrix, what we're trying and we want you to see is like where you stand against the competition. So you put yourself first, okay? You put your company first and then the competitors. Remember, right here, you could probably start with the direct competitors, okay? Or the indirect competitors at the end. Remember that the ones the closer they are to you are the closer as to your real or direct competitors. But we also want you to use a criteria for comparing them based on benefits or values, not so much as of features, because remember, features can change, right? So we want you to consider where you stand against this competition. Now, and sometimes when we do this, we also want you to consider how you're going to do this that is visually appealing. Something that even if you don't say anything, when somebody reads this, can actually identify what you're trying to compare yourself against. Okay, so you can put simple words, or you can actually go with symbols. So remember that, and even if you use symbols, for example, try to be consistent so that way everybody can understand. A lot of teams in the past, as you see in the examples, have actually used price as one of the benefits. But remember, be careful with that, how you identify the benefits, okay? And remember, the benefits have to align with your value propositions, with what you put over there in your business model canvas. So what are the pitfalls? Remember, is that building this is based on understanding the value that you're bringing to your customer and the things that you make as a difference against your competition. But also consider that features are not that important. But remember, when you analyze this and you reflect on this competition matrix, it will give you a base point on how to build a minimal viable product. So instead of you concentrating on all the features or all the bells and whistles that you can include into your new product or service, concentrate on the minimum and the one that satisfies or reduces the pain of your customer. Okay, so with that said, let's talk about disruptive technologies very briefly. When we're talking about disruptive technology, it's somebody that is actually creating something that changes everything completely, right? So, for example, right now, we're thinking about how AI is actually changing your landscape. So when we're creating some of these disruptive technologies, think about how you're going to do this. In your competition matrix, if you're working on a disruptive technology, you need to broaden your horizons. Identify those indirect competitors, the ones that are like kind of doing something similar to yours. But also, as Leslie did, concentrate on highlighting the technology and the innovation, how you're using that technology to make this better and how you're solving the real life problems. Like for example, for Leslie, the real challenges of farmers. So gather data from multiple sources, but try to use reliable sources of data. And also do this in a way that is visually clear and easy to understand. Okay, so remember, here you just need to convince people to use your technology and show them, demonstrate that you are the best choice. Okay, so thank you. Also, questions? I did it on time.
You did it on time and you paced yourself well. Everything was clearly stated and is an excellent presentation of what we're looking for you to be doing for your upcoming slide for next week. Thank you, Francis. Any questions for Francis on what she just said? Feel free to ask. Everyone feel comfortable making their slide for next week? I see at least one thumbs up because some of you don't have your video on.
We're
So I
gonna
can't
see
tell.
amazing competition matrices.
It's like you went into a time warp, Francis. You were able to cover all that
Okay,
stuff.
Eric has a
everything.
question. How many values? Well, which ones are you think are in the spirit of consistency? Let's say that you put 4 or 5 values in your value proposition. I will advise to consider those 4 or 5 as the criteria for your competition matrix. Should your competitive matrix include direct, indirect, or future competitors? Well, it depends. If you are doing something that that has a lot of direct competitors, just stick to those ones. If, for example, you think that you're more into that disruptive technology phase, go with the indirect. Or even if you think that your thing is going to take a few months or years to be implemented, also consider future competitors. But I don't know what the fellow mentors have any comments about that.
Well, that's a good question, which is we sometimes see a competitive matrix that has a little bit of everything in it. And that sometimes can be dangerous because if you're looking at it from the point of view of a mentor or an investor, you would want the competitive matrix to bring up your major competitors. And I would say direct competitors. And so if any mentors want to comment on that, like what is it like when you do a mixed bag and you ignore competitors and you talk about future or indirect competitors instead? Is that a dangerous thing?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it depends on what vertical you're in, and it depends on what you're trying to do with your competitive matrix. I mean, if you're putting a competitive matrix on your website or whatever, it's different than if you're optimizing a pitch deck to try to raise capital. So, if you're selling, it depends on what you're using the matrix for. You might be using the matrix to sell to your customers, in the future, or you might be using your competitive matrix to sell to investors to raise money. And so those oftentimes are different, are created differently, because that's going to be more of a feature by feature comparison. I mean, just go to any B2B SaaS company like HubSpot or anyone, and you can look and they'll just have their competitive matrix with their competitors, and we're better because of this, but that's not the same thing, the same matrix they used for their pitch deck to raise their money in general.
And a similar question is, do we want for this competitive matrix to show that our innovation is better? Or is this simply an honest, open-ended discussion of possibilities?
Well, I want us to, in the spirit of the exercise, use this as an honest exam, right? It's like, see where you are. And I mean, right now, so that you still have time to make it better, right? Obviously, but obviously the idea will be that you have a better spot, right? That you come up on top of all the other ones. But
So it's
be
inspirational, right? It
Yeah.
should be that when we're done building what we're building, it's better than the other direct competitors and
Yeah,
indirect
but
competitors.
don't lie. Don't lie, be honest.
I mean,
As
the
opposed to
other
saying, well, right
thing,
now we're just developing it, and so we're worse than everything else. That's not a good competitive matrix.
yeah, I mean, look, the other thing is you need to know obviously your industry and your vertical that you're in. And one thing I see a lot of pitch decks from academic teams, not just from University of California, but other universities. I mentor all over the country, and like a lot of times a postdoc, grad student, undergrad, or a professor will think that, oh, in my niche, our solution is 10% better. And so, wow, this is amazing. Everyone's going to want to use our product. And honestly, like, you need to research it, because actually no one may care at all about 10% better in your particular vertical or industry. So just, again, this part of this class is talking to customers, but to get to product market fit, you'll be going through the fire to figure out what is actually working and not working in the future. So
Yeah, another quick note is sometimes you have to look, are you a replacement? Are you an alternative? Or are you creating a new market? And and when there's a disruption, it gets even harder to figure out who your competition is, because you might just be, you're going to replace the existing solutions, which might be all of the competition, by using an alternative approach, but you're actually creating a new market. And that's when it gets really complex, but it's the fun area to be in, when just like when it's a truly disruptive and breakthrough approach, because you're creating a market that didn't exist before, but you're leveraging an existing market as an entry point.
Yeah.
Excellent point, John. Tagri, you get the last question or comment.
Yeah, I have a comment to add on to Scott and Francisca with regarding the value propositions. At this stage, we need to be true to ourselves to see how is our products or service better or less than the others. We will use it to tune up our business, our products and service to make it better when we are pitching it to the investors or customers. So at the beginning, we need to look at real, honest, like Francisca said. The other things, when we look at the competitor, sometimes these days the industrial boundaries is getting blurred out. A lot of industry get inside the other industry. So that's, in that case, it will be very hard to identify the direct competitor. So sometimes we look to the indirect competitor as well. If your products or services are a little bit unique and it can overlap between many different industries, 2 or 3 industries. That's
Yeah,
all.
that's right.
Thank
Yes,
you.
no, fantastic. No, that's absolutely right. But also remember that this is a live document. So
Yeah.
like, for example, right now, we're still figuring things out. We haven't finished. Maybe we don't have a prototype. We haven't done a lot of proof of concept. So right now it's like, okay, we start with this aspiration, right? That we're gonna be the best. But then later on, we go and make, additional comparisons, right? And then we're like fine tuning our product or service, and then we can measure where we stand. So it's not like your matrix, the first one that you do, like next week, it's not gonna be your final competition matrix, I hope.
I
Otherwise,
agree.
Scott is not gonna like it. So
I
you need to
agree.
continue working on it.
Thank you.
Okay.
So
Jay?
excellent job, excellent presentation. We could keep talking all night about this, but it's time to break out. And we have enough time. We're a little behind, but we have 5 teams. So each team gets 10 minutes, 4 to present, up to 4 to present, and 6 minutes for feedback. And we'll be out reasonably close to on time.